Hey guys, welcome back to Control Z Crypto. So we're going to have a look at FTMstake today, which is a relatively new ROI DApp from the makers of Matic Stake and AVAX Stake that you can see here. And I think Matic Stake just about ended, I think a day ago or maybe even today. And I had no issues using Matic Stake. It kind of ended as expected. There wasn't any dodginess as we've seen with some other apps where, devs exploit some loophole or change the code on the website. There was none of that. It just kind of ended. So that's a positive sign for me. So I thought I'd look at their FTM offering. And look, I've done a lot of work on the modeling spreadsheet. So still some tweaks I'd like to make, but I think this is a good opportunity to basically apply that spreadsheet to FTMstake and see what we can work out in terms of predictions and how long this is going to last, in my opinion. So FTMstake, as you can see, is pretty much a straight clone from Matic Stake and AVAX Stake. They've even maintained the spelling errors on the website. It's your standard Matic Staker type app with 6 plans, 3 of them being daily withdrawals, 4 of them being locked plans with a higher return because of compounding. And so this is all very familiar. It's the same Matic Staker scenario where the basic rate goes up every 24 hours. So it looks pretty much at face value the same as what we've seen before, but let's get into the code and the audits and see what that tells us. All right, so the Hayes security audit, as we've learned in the last couple of days, or has kind of been reinforced to me that they're not always the most reliable audits. I think there's some positives in the way that this is laid out, and there's some good information that can be found in the audit. But we saw from Matic King and Matic Vault that they don't really check the code that well. They check for, I guess, a set of known backdoors and loopholes, but they don't really check thoroughly for potential issues and that may exist. So with that being understood, let's have a look. So we've got our usual high issue here, the ROI issue, which is present for all of these apps. If you don't know what this is, I suggest you watch some of my videos or some videos on other channels explaining what ROI apps are. Essentially, they are Ponzi schemes, and you should be aware that they are fundamentally high risk. But what we're trying to do is evaluate how risky they are within that context and whether it's possible to make any money. The optimization is a low severity, and that is present on a lot of these apps where they just haven't fixed this kind of issue from a previous fork. I understand it's easy to fix, but why bother? It doesn't really affect most people. It only kind of comes into play if a user creates more than 100 parallel deposits, which is most of the time is pretty unlikely. All right, so their conclusion here is that there are no vulnerabilities, no backdoors, no scam scripts, which is good, but take that again with a grain of salt based on how Hayes Crypto have performed in the past. In terms of the way that the contract works, we'll get into the detail there when we look at the spreadsheet. Basically, of the 6 plans, I'm doing my modeling as always based on plan 4. Because I believe that's the most logical plan for most people to take on day one, where the bulk of the investments are made. It delivers kind of a high return at a reasonable risk. But we can have a look at a couple of different permutations there in the modeling. The other thing to know is the project fee of 10%. So 10% of all deposits go back to the devs. So that means that the contract balance, as soon as you make a deposit, is 10% lower than it should be. So that is a big factor in reducing the longevity of a project. But unfortunately, it is pretty standard on a lot of these. 10% is really, really high for the devs to make a cut. They make a killing on this. But what can you do? It's standard. So the referral system is where there is the first signs of something a little bit strange happening here. So the top bit is pretty standard as well, although it is also in my opinion, way too high. You know, it's 8% referral commission over 3 levels. So if you have a lot of money to put on this, if you're a whale or if you're a dev, you can, you know, coming in early, you can basically create extra wallets and refer your own wallets, and you tweak this in a way that you're getting that 8% commission on large deposits back to yourself, and essentially it's free money that you can take if you want to stuff around and create new wallets and do the calculations to take that advantage. But it's definitely worth it if you're a whale, if you're putting money into it. So that does matter, that 8% referral bonus. It's not just, you know, small YouTubers getting small cuts. It's people who are just referring themselves and getting a lot of money out of the bargain. But this extra referral bonus is something I haven't seen before, and it seems quite shifty to me. So basically what this is saying is that the owner of the contract, the devs, can basically give people who they want an extra bonus for whatever reason they like. And it's 5% on top of this referral bonus. So it takes this 8% up to 12%. So why would they use this? I mean, I can think of 2 reasons. One, if they want to encourage people to shill for this contract, like YouTubers or, you know, other influencers, they can say, hey, promote this and we'll give you an extra 5% on top of this 8% and to make it worth their while. The second is that if they want to take advantage of it for themselves, and I don't see why they wouldn't. So you can imagine being a dev on this contract, you're getting 10% of everything that comes in, and why not just make your own investment and take out, you know, leverage this referral system plus the extra referral bonus to take an extra 12% bonus on top of what you're already getting out. So this is a bit of a red flag to me. It just means that these kinds of contracts are not going to last, and I never expect ROI contracts to last very long. But you know, there's a reasonable expectation. If the fees are low, if the referral bonuses are low, it lasts a certain amount, which is reasonable. But if you start getting high fees, high bonuses, extra bonuses and payouts, the whole thing just kind of collapses really quickly, and we'll see how that plays out in the modeling. And that's about all from the contract. Sorry, from the audit. I just want to have a look at the contract as well, the code. So I took a look. You can see on the screen we've got Matic Stake, which it was forked from on the left, and FTMstake on the right. And I just wanted to compare the code itself, and the reason for this is really what we saw from Matic Vault, which is also audited by Hayes Crypto. There was some changes added to the code that Hayes Crypto didn't seem to pick up that allowed the devs to basically put a hold on transactions, and presumably with the intention of draining that balance at a later date. And I wanted to see if there was anything else that looked shady in the code when compared to the previous fork. So if you have a look at the code, you can see the yellow or the orange parts here. That's where there is the line exists, but there's a small change, and that's reasonable. You can see it's changed from Matic to FTM. All those kind of features of the contract are changing slightly. This green on the right, though, shows the extra bit of code, and we can see all these greens actually relate to the extra bonus and how that works, the extra bonus plan. All this stuff is related to the extra bonus bit. So that's really the only change in the contract. So it seems like they've just kind of cloned the contract, added an extra bonus, which they can at their discretion apply to any account, which I don't like. It seems shady, and well, not necessarily shady. It just reduces the life of the contract. It doesn't introduce any back doors. It just makes it so the devs can give themselves an extra bonus, an extra payment, and anyone else who they feel like they can give an extra payment. And that's not really a good sign for an investment, in my opinion. All right, so let's just have a quick look at the contract on Polygon. So actually, sorry, FTM scan for this one. The code I've shown you, I always like to look at the right contract options as well to see if there's anything that I missed. We've got the usual withdraw, invest, but we've also got the add extra bonus and remove extra bonus that the devs can use. So that just tells me that you know, what the analysis we've done so far on the contract and the audit is correct. There's no forced withdrawal here, which is a good sign, but you know, this extra bonus is in my opinion a bit shifty. What else can you say? Well, transactions, we'll have a look at what's come onto the balance. Nothing else here is really of any concern. The contract, I think we can just say, started about 2 days ago. I've gone and extracted all of these transactions in a spreadsheet, taken the actual investments and put them in the model. So let's take a look at the model now. So here's my updated modeling spreadsheet for all of the ROI DAPP. So my intention going forward is to use this and maybe tweak it a little bit. I'm not going to do a daily update on everything, because I think, you know, what I've learned is the modeling is pretty accurate that I've been doing, and everything is kind of landing within a day or so of the prediction. So there's really no point kind of doing a follow-up unless something weird happens. So I'm happy just to put this out there, and whichever day you watch this on, you can see where the projection's going to go. So talking about FTMstake, here the spreadsheet just does calculations on the base currency and on the FTM scan API to get some of this information directly from the contract. So what do we have? Contract start date March 25 UTC. This spreadsheet does different calculations based on a locked or daily type return. So this is the daily return that some contracts have versus the locked return. So I'm doing as I've said before, I like to calculate based on the lowest locked, because I think that's the one that most people end up going in. But we can just toggle between those two models to see how that affects the longevity. And you can see here on the right hand side the curve that I've been kind of showing you. In red you have the cumulative invested, that's the total invested over time in Matic. The green is the contract balance, and the blue is the new daily investments. So you can see the projections for this locked contract are that they basically, you know, the investment goes up every day, and it's lower than the total invested by that 10%. And then when we hit essentially 14 days, you see it just drop to zero. And the reason for that is just usually related to very high investments on day one and diminishing over time. So we can see how that affects it when we dig into the numbers. So the minimum lock period is 14 days. We've got a daily rate of 8% on day one, but that increases by 0.5% each day subsequently, and that's accounted for in the spreadsheet. We've got a 0% tax rate. So the tax rate is money returned back to the contract on withdrawal. So that's not a feature of this contract. There's also no reinvestment feature in this contract. So that's 0%. And there's a zero dev fee on withdrawal that I can see at all in the contract. And I've had a look in the code and the audit. So there's no dev fee on withdrawal, but there's a 10% dev fee on deposit, as I've spoken about. All right. So in terms of the forecast variables, I've just taken the actuals from the last 2 days. So day one was 1.6 million Matic. Day two was 972 Matic. So you can see a very high day one. In fact, an alarmingly high day one investment, followed by, you know, a pretty good day two investment, pretty solid. But what we tend to see is a real drop off from there. And the way I've set this spreadsheet up to calculate, so I've put a day three investment here of 500,000 as an expectation, and then a daily adjustment of 50%. So I'm expecting basically, you know, so our daily investments kind of go to 500,000 and then start dropping by 50% against the previous day in a kind of curve. So that's probably, I think, a reasonable expectation. You can see that reflected in the blue line, kind of diminishing as a curve there. That's what we've seen on other similar apps. We get really high uptake on day one, not so good on day two, and then dropping off almost to zero. In fact, that could even drop quicker, but it doesn't really matter too much for the longevity, and we can just kind of do some quick tweaks here. If this was a 0%, well, there we go. You could see it kind of brings it up a little bit more, because the daily rate increases, but you're not going to get a drastic well, let's be fair. We're not going to see this kind of this play out in real life. It is going to drop out pretty quickly. So I think this curve is much more representative. So this date investment just shows invested shows today's date for returns calculation, which we'll look at in a minute. I've added a referral adjustment of 0.2%. So this is just to account for additional referrals that are unknowns, essentially, from the point of view of the contract. So basically that 8 to 12%. We don't know how many people are going to take advantage of that. So I've just put a kind of a nominal amount in there. It shouldn't really make too much of a difference. I mean, if you jack that up to 1%, I don't think it actually changes the curve because it drops so drastically anyway. But this is more useful for, I think, daily apps. So there's no bonus for this contract. No other. Some contracts have like a hold bonus and other things that this is supposed to adjust for, but there's nothing under this contract. All right, so our dashboard. So the contract has been in operation for 2 days, and I think it's pretty much dead on 2 days at this stage. And I've got this last live balance versus last 1 hour balance. Still just tweaking this. It's not 100% working, so I'm just going to rerun the balance script, see if there's any update there. Not too much. So this is just intended to show if the contract balance is going up or down. We can just check that on the site. So the contract balance, if I hit refresh, 2271. So it is still going up, and that's what you expect. Basically, in the first few days, it is going to keep going up, and then it's just going to kind of fall off a cliff. The total investment at this stage, this is the expected, the expected contract balance and the expected total investment. You can see this is much higher than they are on the site. So the total stake is 2.8. The total contract balance is 2.2. That's because when I'm recording this right now is about half an hour after UTC midnight. So it's actually taking the end of day calculations. So if I just drop down in the spreadsheet to what the expectations were at the end of yesterday UTC, we get something that is much more in line. So cumulative invested 2.6, contract balance 2.3, and that is really similar to what this is, or obviously a little bit higher. In the total FTM stake, just because half an hour or so has passed beyond that date. So, but the contract balance is actually lower relative to that, which is interesting. And there are a few reasons I can think of for that. One is that some people, of course, are going in the daily plan and taking a little bit of profit out early. And the second one is obviously that you have those referral bonuses that are also coming out of the contract. So it's about, I think, you could estimate about 50 to 100K referral bonuses. So it's not massively hitting the bottom line at this stage, but it is always a concern. All right, moving on through the figures. So what are we up to? So days operational 2. I think I've just duplicated that field, so I might just remove that. Average daily investments is 1.5. If that's right, that's between the 2 days so far, or maybe even the 3 days, including today. That's how much has gone in average per day. So obviously it's not that accurate early on in the modeling, because that really drops down. But the idea of this field is just to make a rough gauge if the investment level in the first few days or up to today is high enough to sustain it. So based on this model, estimated end date is April the 9th, 13 days remaining. And this is what we see with a lot of these plans. So this may look like a unlikely scenario kind of falling off the cliff in one day, but it's what we've seen on a lot of contracts lately. So basically what happens is everyone piles on at the beginning. So right at the start of the contract, you get a really high investment dwindling off. And then 14 days later, when those unlock, you have to pay all of those initial payments off. And if you're in on day 2 on a locked plan, you're probably not going to get paid. So that's where we are at the moment. And what's not helping that is the high deposit fees, high referral bonuses that are just draining that contract. And you can see that. We'll just dig into the figures here. So I've got a section here on the daily plan calculations and a section on the lock plan calculations. So for the day one invested, 1.6 million, deposit fees taken out, of course, and the initial rate of return, so is 194% on the locked plan at the first 8%. You can see that goes up every day, but even on the first day, this is how much the contract needs to pay back based on the people who've invested the first on day one. So on day one, you need to pay back 3.2 million Matic to people who've invested 1.6 million Matic. And when that becomes unlocked on day 14, that's why the contract balance will just drop to zero, because that 3.2 million, you can see, is the contract balance. So essentially that contract balance at day 14 consists of enough to pay back pretty much the people who have just invested on day one, maybe a little bit less, maybe a couple who have invested on day two. So absolutely no point in my view investing on this kind of plan in a locked plan after day one. So there may be a case to be made to invest in one of the unlocked plans to make your money back, and let's look see if that's feasible as well. So forecast, estimated data was remaining 3. So this is expected return if you're in the lock plan is 0, because basically the way this calculation works is that if you if you were to lock in today, your unlocked returns happen after the contract balance hits 0, and that means that you're not going to get any money. But if you were to invest in a unlocked plan, that would be plan 1 essentially. How does that work? Well, your expected daily return if you're investing today is 112%. Let's have a look at that on the spreadsheet under unlocked returns. So you're essentially making that 8% back each day, and your cumulative returns are going up until you are hitting the target end date of what was it again? End date of April 9, which is here. So your daily returns, if I can follow this through, around 112%. So that is pretty good. So there is still some possibility to make a profit if you were to invest today, in my opinion, based on this analysis. I think 112% is still pretty risky in my opinion, because there's a lot of factors at play. You know, if these daily deposit rates are much lower, that contract is going to dwindle even more. If some percentage of people are also in the unlocked plan, that contract balance is going to start dropping a little bit quicker, and it's not really going to have much to take. You know, the movement of those people into the daily contract won't take much off this drop. This drop is going to happen quickly regardless, and you'll see kind of a slight decrease early on. So in my opinion, it's kind of borderline. It's cutting it fine between making a profit and coming out behind. But the benefit of being in the locked plan, in the unlocked plan, is that you can get your daily returns back. So even if you hit 95, 97, you're controlling your risk, and I would expect you probably realistically expect to get somewhere around 105% back, just based on how this thing looks like it's going to go. So the summary of the risk ratings. Audit site is medium, so I've called out some issues in the contract, and that is being that high referral bonus, then the referral bonus adjustment thing. So that's a bit of a red flag. But apart from that, everything else looks fine. So I'd put this at about a medium. Timing is still early. We're still less than 3 days, so that's good. The uptake is high, so this is a low risk against the uptake. So no concern. Sometimes you're worried that day one there's just not enough uptake to sustain it, but at the same time that is a really high day one uptake as compared to the day two, and likely the way that this is going to go. So I'm always worried if this day one is too low or if it's too high. So at this stage, I'm going to say like it's quite high, and that makes the rest of the contract lifespan look pretty risky. Profitability, risk is low because you're expected to get your 100% back, or greater than 100% back. That's only if you're in the daily plan, that's plan 1, and not if you're in any of the lock plan. If you're in the lock plan, then I would not go into I would not expect to see any of your returns at this stage. Probably even if you invested on day 2, it looks like it's just day 1 that's going to see the money on the 9th of April. Contract balance is flat according to this, but as we've seen, it is slightly going up. And the risk rate, look, I put this to high, but I might just shift it down to medium. So it's medium for me. If you're investing on the daily plan, you can potentially see a little bit of return there while controlling your risk. So in the context of ROI apps in general, I would say this is probably a medium investment, but I wouldn't expect to see massive gains at all. So if anything, you're looking at around 105 to 110% returns, or slightly lower. And if you don't make your investment back, it should be kind of in the high 90s. So that's, in my view, that's a medium risk investment. But for me, I'm not going to be investing in FTMstake. I think all of these factors, the return is really not high enough for me in terms of controlling the risk, and so I won't be investing. But obviously, none of this is financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Please do your own research. This is all just my opinion. And at this stage, for me, it's a do not invest on FTMstake. But if you were to go into the daily plan, the modeling is showing that it would be a reasonable investment. You could potentially see some very small amount of gains. So look, that's all for the model, and I think for this video. Let me know if there's anything more you'd like to see in these videos going forward. There are some tweaks to this I'd like to make. One, for example, is for these hybrid type plans, I want to be able to set a percentage that I think are going to go into plan 1 versus plan 4, and have the curve kind of adjust based on that percentage. It's a feature I'll try to build in. I don't think it makes a huge difference really, because when you see this, or to this one in particular, when you see such a high day 1 and you see it just kind of grow and fall off a cliff, it's not going to make a difference. It's going to fall off that cliff regardless. And as a rule of thumb, you can kind of apply this kind of logic to most of these 14-day locks, that when it's going to get to day 14, it's not going to get much further. There are exceptions. I think Multimatic was a slight exception to that one, just because of the kind of momentum it had, and the amount of people who, for some reason believed in it and went into a higher plan. Same with Matic Staker. But those really are the exceptions, that the big ones, the ones that get a lot of publicity. When you have a smaller contract, when I say smaller, I mean it's less hype around it, less people kind of talking about it and getting buzzed about it. You pretty much expect this to happen, because the only people who are investing are the really savvy people who only invest on day 1 or 2, and then beyond that it kind of drops off. What you want to see for this curve to look anything like a kind of rounded curve, you need this blue line to stay high. So if that blue line was to stay a little bit higher, let's just put a -30 in there, and you can see how that affects it. So if the daily investments were a little bit higher, you can see that basically they still get that cliff, but there is still a little bit of investment coming in these late stages to hold it up slightly longer. So it doesn't really matter too much when the daily investment is this high. It doesn't really matter. But say if you were to get flat 50,000, maybe just dropping 5%. Let's say, you can see that curve lasts a bit longer, because you have those new investments coming in, and when you fall off this cliff, you can kind of sustain. You're paying off day 1, day 2, day 3, and a bit of day 4. You get a few extra days out of it. That's how things like Matic Staker can last longer, and Multimatic can last longer, because people are still putting in, and people up front are putting into longer plans. That's just, in my opinion, not going to happen with these less kind of hyped contracts. So we're just going to see this drop off, as people get savvier and savvier. So that's it for the video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy this content, if you want to see more of this content, please hit the like and subscribe button. I'm going to have a link to FTMstake if you're interested in the comments, in the description, sorry. It's not going to be a referral link in this case because I'm not investing, but when I do invest in these contracts, I will have a referral link in the description. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.